Hey guys, tonight we step into a world where the glint of gold doesn't just catch the light, it seems to create it. Imagine a man stepping out of a blacked-out Mercedes Maybach, his suit a flawless cut of midnight blue, the fabric whispering against itself like it's afraid to wrinkle. This isn't just any man. This is Teodoro Nguema Obiang, the oil prince of Equatorial Guinea, a figure who has spent decades turning his country's black gold into a personal palette of shimmering excess. You can almost hear the hum of the jet engines cooling on the tarmac behind him, the air perfumed with the faint scent of imported leather and something rarer, confidence that borders on untouchable. You probably wouldn't survive a week in his shoes, not because the streets are dangerous, but because the pace of his life might just break your heart, your bank account, and maybe your moral compass all at once. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening right now, I want you to drop your location and your local time in the comments. I always like knowing exactly where in the world you are as we drift into these stories together. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. He is born into a palace, though in Malabo, the capital city. A palace doesn't always mean marble and chandeliers. It's the guarded compound of the ruling family, heavy walls concealing manicured gardens, imported wines, and a dining table that seems to stretch into the shadows. His father, Teodoro Obiang Nguema, is not just the president. He is the architect of a regime that has outlasted coups, sanctions, and whispers of rebellion. Young Teodoran, as he is nicknamed, grows up not in the shadow of this power, but in its warm and constant light. He is schooled abroad, where uniforms are crisp, and the fees are paid in the kind of currency that needs no conversion: oil money. The other boys in his classes talk about family businesses, about modest summer holidays in Spain. But Teodorine speaks of yachts before he even owns one, of Paris weekends that sound like fairy tales to children still learning to drive. The seed is planted early. In his world, limits are not boundaries. They are challenges. By his late teens, he has already tasted what the rest of his peers only dream about: a summer in Los Angeles, tucked into the hills where the air smells faintly of eucalyptus and money, gives him a crash course in celebrity culture. He learns that it's not enough to be rich. You must be seen being rich. Malibu sunsets stretch across the horizon like oil paintings, and Teodoran learns to arrive at parties not with just one car, but with a convoy. Every movement is a performance. Every drink is an audition for a life larger than life itself. His tailored suits are more than fabric. They are statements. Dark navy for quiet dinners with political guests, crisp ivory for the front row at Fashion Week, and the occasional daring velvet for nights when the champagne flows like a river. Each one is cut in Paris or Milan, measured by hands that have dressed kings, movie stars, and magnates. He doesn't simply wear them, he inhabits them, as though the threads were woven with strands of his own ambition. The country that fuels his lifestyle is small, tucked along the coast of Central Africa, but beneath its soil lies crude oil in staggering quantities. In the 1990s and 2000s, as oil companies flood in, Equatorial Guinea's GDP explodes. For most of its citizens, this wealth is something they hear about but never touch. For Teodorin, it is something he can hold in his hand, in the form of diamond cufflinks, supercar keys, and property deeds stamped with international seals. He begins to occupy a strange space between political air and cultural figure. In Malabo, he is the prince who never needs introduction. In Paris, he is the mysterious African with a spending habit that turns auctioneers' heads. In Los Angeles, he is the man who tips so well the valet boys remember his name, long after the guests have forgotten the party. It's not all an accident. He studies the art of presence, the way some men study warfare or diplomacy. He knows the value of a well-timed photo, a casually shared moment on the deck of a yacht with an international pop star. He knows the power of sitting in the corner booth of the most exclusive club, speaking little, smiling less, and letting the room imagine its own stories about him. And yet, in the quiet moments, if there are any, he still moves like a man aware that the world is watching. Even his arrivals at state events are a careful dance between duty and theater. The motorcade glides to a stop. The door opens, and he steps out with a half smile that says he belongs here, but he could just as easily be somewhere else, somewhere more exciting. Many people still think that his rise was inevitable, that being the son of Africa's longest-serving leader guaranteed his place in this orbit of privilege. But inevitability does not explain the skill with which he has navigated international circles, the almost cinematic timing of his appearances on the global stage. So what do you think? Was he simply born into this? Or has he, in his own way, engineered it? Because the truth is, he plays the long game. He doesn't just spend, he invests in visibility, in the kind of allure that money alone can't buy. The cars, the watches, the art, each is a brick in the edifice of his persona. And behind it all, somewhere deep in the machinery of the state, the oil keeps flowing, the wells keep pumping, and the accounts keep swelling. By the time he turns 30, he is already a legend in certain circles. Young African entrepreneurs speak his name with a mix of admiration and disbelief. European tabloids treat his shopping trips like red carpet events. American journalists, when they write about him, often struggle to decide whether he is a cautionary tale or a modern Gatsby. In one photograph that circulates online, he is standing beside a car so rare that even collectors have to look twice. The shine on its hood mirrors his tailored jacket perfectly. It's an image that says everything: wealth, precision, and a certain defiance toward the idea that anyone else's rules apply to him. And in that moment, you see the thread that will weave through the rest of his life, the merging of political royalty with a playboy's appetite. Not recklessly, though the headlines might suggest otherwise, but with a deliberate hand, arranging the pieces on a board most people can't even see. From the compound walls of his childhood to the marble floors of his Malibu mansion, from the discreet corners of Parisian clubs to the roaring decks of yachts in the Mediterranean, his story begins here, with the rise of an oil prince in tailored suits. A man determined to turn power into performance, and performance into permanence. Malabo in the 1980s and 1990s is not a city most of the world thinks about, but for Teodoro, it is the center of the universe. The air is thick with salt from the nearby Atlantic, the streets winding between colonial-era buildings painted in fading pastels. Palm trees sway above, their shadows stretching across sidewalks where government convoys occasionally roll past. Inside the presidential compound, life is its own ecosystem. Air-conditioned halls, polished tile floors that reflect the glow of ornate chandeliers, and a rhythm dictated by the schedule of his father, the president. As the eldest son, Teodoro is more than just a boy in a powerful family. He is an heir. There is a constant awareness in the household that his life is not fully his own. Tutors come and go, some from the local elite, others flown in from Europe. They teach him not just mathematics or literature, but etiquette. How to greet a foreign dignitary, how to keep a poker face in a negotiation, how to wear authority like a second skin. He is quiet as a child, observant in a way that unsettles some of the staff. He watches how visitors are treated, how gifts are exchanged, how promises are made, and sometimes quietly broken. In this way, he learns early that power is less about the words spoken and more about who controls the room. Even in youth, there is an aura about him. At school, classmates whisper about his family's wealth, though few can comprehend its scale. He arrives in neatly pressed uniforms, his shoes always spotless, his handwriting practiced and precise. Teachers treat him with a kind of cautious respect, aware that every interaction could be remembered and relayed to someone higher up. When the oil boom begins to reshape Equatorial Guinea's economy, Teodoro is still in his teens. The discovery of vast reserves under the Gulf of Guinea transforms his father's presidency overnight. Foreign oil companies descend on the nation, bringing contracts, engineers, and, most importantly, cash. The state's coffers swell, and with them, the family's resources. The compound changes, the gardens expand, filled with imported roses and orchids. The kitchen begins to prepare dishes that require ingredients flown in from Europe. The family travels more often, not just to neighboring African states, but to capitals across the globe. For Teodoro, these trips are more than diplomatic duty. They are windows into lifestyles that will shape his ambitions. In Paris, he sees the elegance of Avenue Montaigne, where the boutiques seem to glow even in daylight. In Geneva, he learns that wealth can be as discreet as a numbered bank account. In Los Angeles, he understands that image is everything, that a story told well can be as valuable as the truth itself. Back in Malabo, his room begins to reflect these experiences. Posters of European football clubs hang beside photographs of luxury cars. Shelves fill with souvenirs from abroad, watches gifted by family friends, rare sneakers bought in New York, cologne in bottles shaped like sculpted glass. The world is opening up, and he is determined to step into it, not as a tourist, but as a participant. His father is a man of discipline, but he allows his son certain freedoms, perhaps believing that exposure to the world will make him a more capable leader one day. There are private lessons in Spanish, French, and English. There are weekends spent learning the technical details of government operations, how budgets are drafted, how trade deals are signed, how loyalty is rewarded in politics. Yet, for all this preparation, Teodoro begins to feel the pull of a different kind of power. Not the power of a president behind a desk, but the power of a man whose presence alone can bend a room. He starts to understand that in the modern world, influence isn't only measured in votes or decrees, it's measured in visibility, in the stories people tell about you when you're not in the room. The first time he is allowed to attend a state banquet as a young man, he studies every detail. The way crystal glasses catch the light, the weight of the silverware in his hand, the subtle choreography of handshakes and small talk. When the evening ends, he lingers in the ballroom after the guests have gone, absorbing the lingering scent of perfume and polished wood, the echo of laughter that once filled the space. Many people still think that his path was always about politics, that he was destined to be molded into a leader in his father's image. But the truth is more complicated. Beneath the tailored suits and diplomatic smiles, there is a restless energy. He is already imagining a life where the trappings of power are not confined to a palace, but are mobile, global, and entirely his to command. So what do you think? Was he chasing his father's shadow, or building something of his own from the very beginning? As his 20s approach, the two worlds, duty and desire, begin to merge. Official trips become opportunities to explore high fashion districts. Diplomatic gatherings lead to private dinners in penthouse apartments. Invitations start arriving from people outside the political sphere. Musicians, fashion designers, film producers, people who see in him not just a political heir, but a kindred spirit in the pursuit of the extraordinary. There are nights in Malabo where he slips away from the compound, trading the marble halls for the humid air of the city's nightlife. The clubs are small by European standards, but they have their own rhythm. Afro beats spilling into the street, the glow of neon against the sea breeze. Here, he is both recognized and removed, a man everyone knows but few truly understand. By the time he officially steps into his first governmental role, he already carries himself like someone who has seen more than his title suggests. The suit fits perfectly, the watch glints under the press lights, and his handshake is firm without being aggressive. The cameras capture the moment, but what they don't show is the calculation behind his eyes. A young man aware that the future is a stage, and he is learning how to play the lead. And so, the golden boy of Malabo is not merely born, he is crafted. Every trip abroad, every tailored suit, every whispered conversation in the corridors of power is another stitch in the fabric of his emerging identity. The story is only beginning, but already the outline is clear. A life built not just on oil money, but on the careful cultivation of image, access, and ambition. The first time Teodoro boards a private jet alone, it is more than just a flight. It is a declaration. He is in his early 20s, dressed in a charcoal suit with a crisp white shirt, no tie. The top button undone as if to remind anyone watching that while he respects tradition, he is not bound by it. The aircraft gleams on the runway, a Gulf Stream with polished silver edges that reflect the morning sun. The engines hum in a low, steady rhythm, promising speed and comfort in equal measure. Destination: Paris, but not the Paris of tourists and guidebooks. This is the Paris of silk-lined hotel suites, champagne chilled in ice buckets that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and drivers who know the city's back streets like the veins on their hands. This is where the appetite for excess first finds its proper stage. The moment he steps into the Ritz, the staff move as though rehearsed. Doors open just as he approaches, his name spoken with the soft reverence reserved for royalty and the truly wealthy. The suite overlooks Place Vendôme, where jewelers display treasures in windows that glimmer under Parisian street lamps. From the balcony, he watches the slow ballet of the city below. Black cars gliding into courtyards, couples walking arm in arm, the faint clink of glass from hidden terraces. He has come not just to enjoy, but to learn. Every dinner is a lesson in how the elite operate. Conversations here are not about price tags. They are about provenance, rarity, and the kind of exclusivity that cannot be bought with money alone. In Paris, he begins to understand that wealth is a language, and only those fluent in its subtleties are truly accepted into its inner circles. One evening, in the golden-lit dining room of Maxime's, he sits opposite a French art dealer who has been in the business for over 4 decades. The man speaks of auctions where paintings are sold without ever being named, where the bidders are shadows behind numbered paddles. Teodoro listens intently, sipping a glass of Bordeaux that has been aged longer than he has been alive. He knows that art is more than decoration. It is currency, influence, and an unspoken bond among the powerful. From Paris, the trail leads to Los Angeles. If Paris teaches him discretion, Los Angeles teaches him spectacle. The city stretches under a haze of sunlight, palm trees swaying above streets lined with boutiques and billboards. Here, the game is not to hide wealth, but to amplify it. He rents a villa in the Hollywood Hills, the infinity pool spilling out over the skyline. Nights are a carousel of rooftop parties, red carpet premieres, and the thrum of bass from clubs where the velvet ropes part without question. He learns the value of being seen with the right people. A casual photograph with a chart-topping musician becomes a headline. A quiet conversation in the corner of a club turns into a rumor that spreads across continents. Image, he realizes, is as much a form of capital as oil or gold. On one particularly wild weekend, he charters a jet to take a small group from Los Angeles to Ibiza. The flight itself is a party, music loud enough to drown out the engines, champagne flowing freely, the air heavy with perfume and the scent of expensive leather seats. Ibiza delivers exactly what he expects: sunlit mornings on yachts, afternoons on beaches that seem to exist outside time, and nights that dissolve into the glow of sunrise. By now, his reputation precedes him. In cities where the rich gather, whispers travel quickly. The African oil prince who spends like a movie mogul, who arrives with style and leaves before the cameras catch too much. This is not recklessness. It is strategy. He is crafting a mystique, a sense that no matter how much you see, there is always more to him than you can grasp. Many people still think that these trips were simply indulgence, the wasteful habits of a young man born into unearned wealth. But to those who understand the politics of image, it is clear that he is building a personal brand. So what do you think? Is this just decadence, or is it a calculated investment in a persona that will shield him for decades? The habits begin to take root. In every city, he has a favorite driver, a favorite suite, a favorite table at a restaurant that doesn't technically take reservations. He tips generously, but without flourish, never in a way that feels staged. When he buys in multiples: a suit in 3 colors, a watch in 2 different metals, a painting from the same artist in both oil and sketch. The teenage appetite for luxury has matured into a kind of ritual. In Paris, he ends every visit with a stop at a certain jeweler. In Los Angeles, he never leaves without a new set of keys to something fast and loud. In Ibiza, there is always one night reserved for a private dinner at sea. The boat anchored just far enough from shore to see the city's lights as a distant glitter, and yet, there are moments when the mask slips, if only slightly. Alone in the back of a car, winding through the streets of an unfamiliar city, he stares out at people walking home from work, couples sharing ice cream, a group of kids chasing each other in a park. It is a reminder, perhaps fleeting, that there is another world, one not shaped by motorcades and million-euro purchases. By the end of the decade, the pattern is set. Teodorin's name has become synonymous with tailored suits, late-night arrivals, and an orbit of friends drawn from the ranks of the rich, the famous, and the curious. Whether in the hushed corridors of Parisian auction houses or the sunlit decks of yachts in the Mediterranean, he moves with the ease of someone who has learned not just how to live in excess, but how to make excess itself a kind of art. It begins in a haze of neon and bass, somewhere between Paris and Los Angeles, in the kind of world where clocks don't matter, and the day begins when the sun hits the mirrored walls of a penthouse suite. By now, Teodoro has perfected the art of arrival. Not too early, never too eager. He likes the anticipation to build before he steps through the door. Likes that the music dips ever so slightly when people realize he's here. The nightclub is his hunting ground, not for prey, but for presence. It's the early 2010s, and the global jet set is at full swing. Cities like Dubai, Miami, and Saint-Tropez have become the new playgrounds for the ultra-wealthy, and Teodoro glides between them with the nonchalance of a man changing shirts. He has the advantage of oil money, steady, deep, and politically insulated, and he pours it into crafting nights that feel like small-scale legends. In Paris, it's the shadowy interiors of Le Baron and VIP room. In Los Angeles, it's Hyde, Chateau Marmont, or an after-hours villa party where the guest list is shorter than the wine list. In Dubai, it's a private floor at Cavalli Club, the chandeliers dripping crystal above tables stacked with bottles of Dom Perignon, each lit with sparklers like handheld stars. He travels with an entourage, but it's not just a gaggle of hangers-on. There's the friend who knows every major DJ on a first-name basis. There's the fixer who can get them into any club in any city without so much as a reservation. There's the quiet cousin who handles certain delicate logistics. Together, they form a moving bubble of energy, equal parts family, security, and spectacle. The clothes, as always, are immaculate. Silk shirts in jewel tones, open at the collar to reveal a gold chain. Tailored jackets cut to allow freedom of movement, because the night is long, and there's no telling where it will end. Shoes polished to a mirror shine, but never the kind you'd find in a department store. Everything custom, everything chosen. The drinks flow freely, but not in the sloppy way of amateurs. Here, champagne is less a beverage than a statement. The magnum bottles, the labels instantly recognizable to anyone who matters, the ritual of the cork popping and the liquid foaming into crystal flutes. He knows when to send a bottle to a table across the room, when to toast with the DJ, when to lean in and say something just loud enough for a smile and a nod. Sometimes the night spills over into the morning in ways that blur geography. One Friday, he leaves a Paris club just after 4 a.m., slides into a waiting car, and within hours is boarding a jet to Ibiza for an afternoon set by a world-famous DJ. By midnight, he's on the deck of a yacht in the Mediterranean, the water reflecting the colored lights from the coastline. By Sunday evening, he's back in Paris, walking into a dinner as if he'd never left. Many people still think that this lifestyle is unsustainable, that even the deepest well of wealth eventually runs dry. But Teodoro is not just spending. He is moving within a network. So what do you think? Is this chaos, or is this careful curation of influence disguised as indulgence? In the quieter moments, if such moments can be called quiet, he is taking mental notes. Which club owners run their operations like empires? Which DJs draw the most valuable crowd? Which cities are rising on the nightlife map, and which are fading? It's not just about where the party is tonight. It's about where it will be next year, and who will be there when it happens. There's a rhythm to it all. He doesn't hit every club, every weekend. He knows that absence can be as powerful as presence. A few weeks without an appearance, and the whispers start. Is he in New York? Did he buy another yacht? Who's in his circle now? Then, when he finally walks back into the room, it's an event. The Playboy persona is only part of it. Behind the music, the champagne, and the flash of cameras, There's a man building a story about himself, one party at a time. And in the telling of that story, every dance floor becomes a stage. Every night an act in an ongoing performance where the real audience isn't the people in the room. It's the world watching from afar, wondering what he'll do next. The Malibu property isn't simply a house, it's an announcement. Perched above the Pacific on a stretch of coastline where neighbors include Hollywood producers, tech billionaires, and rock legends, the mansion is a $30 million jewel set into the California cliffs. The driveway curves up through manicured hedges, leading to a set of gates that open like the prologue to a film you've never seen but instantly want to watch. The facade is all glass and clean lines, with an infinity pool that seems to pour directly into the ocean. Inside, it is a study in curated excess. Italian marble floors, glass balustrades, and walls designed to showcase art that costs more than most people's homes. Each window frames the Pacific as if it were an ever-changing painting. Sunrise in pinks and golds, midday in searing blue, sunset in molten orange. The acquisition makes the American press. In Los Angeles, whispers start to circulate. Who is this African oil prince, and why Malibu? The answer, of course, is layered. Malibu offers privacy and proximity, seclusion from prying eyes, but just a short drive to the glitter of Beverly Hills, the studios, the clubs. When Teodoro arrives for the first time, it's in a convoy of black SUVs, the sun dropping low on the horizon. Staff are already in place, the pantry stocked with imported wines, the garage arranged like a showroom. There's a Bugatti parked beside a Ferrari, beside a Rolls-Royce Phantom. Machines chosen not for utility, but for the statement they make when the garage door rises. The housewarming is legendary before it even happens. Invitations are whispered rather than mailed, passed from one celebrity to another with a nod and a, "You'll want to be there." The night arrives with the salty breeze rolling in off the ocean, the driveway lit with soft amber lights. Guests pass through the open doors to find an interior transformed into a living gallery. Art on the walls, live music by the pool, tables draped in white linen holding dishes from a Michelin-starred chef flown in from Paris. Out on the deck, the Pacific murmurs below as glasses clink and laughter drifts into the night air. Teodoro moves through the crowd like a conductor, never staying too long in one place, never making anyone feel overlooked. The suit is custom, the watch gleaming under the terrace lights, the shoes polished so perfectly they could reflect the moonlight. But Malibu is more than a stage for parties. It's a base of operations. From here, he can be in New York by morning, Paris by the next day, and back in Los Angeles by the weekend. It's a place to host, to plot, to retreat when the headlines grow too loud. Many people still think that the Malibu estate is simply an indulgence, a vanity purchase by a man who can afford anything. But it's also a foothold, a marker in one of the world's most competitive real estate markets, a symbol that he belongs not just to the African elite, but to the global club of the ultra-wealthy. So what do you think? Was it just about the view, or about planting a flag in American soil? There are quiet days here too, though they are rare. Mornings when the sound of the waves is the only thing that cuts through the stillness. He'll sit by the pool with an espresso, watching the pelicans glide just above the waterline, the sun's reflection winking on the surface. Even in those moments, the phone is never far. Deals are discussed, invitations extended, arrangements made for the next trip, the next appearance. In the garage, The cars wait like sleeping animals, their polished surfaces catching the light as the door opens. Sometimes he'll choose the Ferrari for a quick run up the Pacific Coast Highway, the ocean wind tangling through his hair as the V12 roars against the cliffs. Other days, it's the Phantom, gliding into the city for dinner at a restaurant where the maître d' greets him by name. The Malibu mansion becomes part of his myth. For some, it's proof of extravagance. For others, it's a reminder that power can buy not just property, but a slice of a lifestyle that millions dream about and almost no one achieves. And for Teodoro, it is simply another stage, one with the Pacific as its backdrop, where every sunrise offers the chance to rewrite the script. The first time the Bugatti Veyron arrives in Malibu, it's a spectacle. Even on a coastline where Ferraris and Lamborghinis are as common as surfboards, the Veyron commands attention. Its curves are aerodynamic poetry, the polished bodywork reflecting the Pacific light in shifting shades of chrome and deep midnight blue. The license plate is custom, nothing ostentatious, but enough to signal that this is not just another sports car. Inside the garage, it joins an already formidable fleet. There's a gold-plated Lamborghini Aventador, its body gleaming like a bar of bullion under the soft glow of recessed lights. A Ferrari Enzo sits beside it, its crimson paint so flawless it seems almost unreal. There's a McLaren P1, a Bentley Mulsanne, and an Aston Martin DBS, each car selected with the same care some people reserve for art. These are not idle purchases. For Teodoro, each car is a story, a statement, a passport into certain circles. At a charity gala in Los Angeles, it's the Phantom, silent, dignified, an unspoken reminder that wealth can move without noise. For a late-night arrival in Paris, it's the Bugatti, engine rumbling like distant thunder as it glides up to the curb. The supercars are also part of his travel signature. They are shipped across oceans for summer seasons in the Mediterranean or winters in Dubai. In Monaco, he takes the Veyron along the Grand Prix route at dawn, the empty streets amplifying the growl of the engine. In Abu Dhabi, the Lamborghini prowls the Corniche, the gold body catching the desert sun until it almost blinds onlookers. One night in Los Angeles, he joins an impromptu supercar rally. It's an invitation-only event, no advertising, no public routes, just a dozen cars worth more than most people's lifetime earnings tearing through the canyon roads under the moonlight. He doesn't race recklessly. Instead, he treats the road as a stage, the deep roar of his car announcing his presence before the headlights even crest the next bend. Many people still think that this is pure vanity, a garage built to provoke envy. But in his world, the car you arrive in speaks before you do. So what do you think? Are these just toys? Or are they tools in a carefully designed language of influence? Back in Malabo, the cars are more than just mechanical wonders. They are symbols. Locals watch as convoys of polished machines roll through the streets, a reminder of the gap between the oil wealth that fuels his life and the reality most citizens live in. Critics call it excessive, but admirers see it as a display of national pride, proof that someone from their small country can command attention on the world stage. The maintenance alone is a production. Specialist mechanics are flown in from Europe, their hands insured for sums that would make most people's heads spin. The cars are tuned not just for performance, but for perfection. Engines purring, leather interiors free of even a single crease. Even the tires are changed more often than most people change phones, ensuring that every drive is flawless. And then there are the one-off commissions. Cars built to his specifications, with interiors stitched from rare leathers, dashboards inlaid with custom engravings, sound systems tuned to perfection. These are vehicles that will never appear in showrooms, that will never be test-driven by anyone else. They are his alone. There's a certain ritual to the way he interacts with them. Before a night out, he'll walk the line of gleaming machines, pausing in front of each as if listening for some silent invitation. Sometimes the choice is practical. More often, it's a mood, a desire to arrive somewhere in a way that no one else can, and so the cars become an extension of his persona. They are fast, rare, and impossible to ignore, just like the man himself. Wherever he goes, the low growl of a V12 or the sudden scream of a turbocharged engine precedes him. And for Teodoro, that's the point. Before a single word is spoken, the message is already clear. He has arrived, and he is exactly where he intends to be. Breakfast in Teodoro's world is not a bowl of cereal or a quick coffee before rushing out the door. It is an orchestrated event. In Malibu, it might begin on the terrace overlooking the Pacific, the early sunlight pooling over the glass table. In Paris, it's in a penthouse suite, where the Eiffel Tower is framed in the window like a living postcard. In Malabo, it's in a private garden, the air heavy with the scent of frangipani and freshly cut grass, guarded by discreet security. The spread is always the same in principle: abundance, precision, and a touch of the outrageous. Bowls of berries, blueberries, raspberries, and blackberries, shipped in overnight from wherever they are in season. Croissants still warm from the oven, the layers so delicate they flake at the lightest touch. Plates of mango and papaya, sliced with a jeweler's precision. And then there are the diamonds, not literally scattered across the table, but often in the form of jewelry that has been casually set aside. A ring placed near the espresso cup, a watch resting beside the folded napkin, cufflinks glinting in the morning light. It is here, in these unhurried hours, that he takes meetings. A real estate agent from Monaco might present photographs of a clifftop villa. An art dealer from London might send high-resolution images of a painting about to go to auction. Friends might drift in, designers, musicians, minor royals, each adding their own cadence to the morning. Deals are made over coffee. Partnerships are sealed with a handshake and a smile across the table. The diamonds, when they are the focus, are chosen with the same meticulous care as his cars or his suits. He favors pieces that tell stories. An emerald cut stone once owned by an Italian countess, a Cartier necklace from the 1920s, a pair of diamond cufflinks that once belonged to a European industrialist. These are not simply ornaments. They are conversation starters, portable symbols of taste and access. Many people still think that the diamonds are an unnecessary flourish, a gaudy flex from a man already drowning in wealth. But to those who move in the same rarefied circles, jewelry is as much a currency as cash, an unspoken language of status. So, what do you think? Is it vanity, or is it another calculated layer in the armor of image? There's a particular memory that repeats itself in the accounts of those who have shared his mornings. In Paris, on a spring day, the table is set near the window of his penthouse. A platter of fresh figs sits beside a crystal bowl of caviar. The room smells faintly of roasted coffee and the leather-bound books that line the shelves. As the conversation drifts from Fashion Week gossip to the price of oil, Teodoro picks up a small box from the table, opens it, and reveals a diamond ring that seems to catch every bit of light in the room. He spins it slowly between his fingers, before passing it to a guest without a word. It's an unspoken challenge. appreciate it, understand it, know what it represents. The guest, of course, does. In these moments, Teodoro isn't just displaying wealth. He's testing perception, seeing who can read the subtext of a gesture. The diamonds are also a tool of memory. He can tell you where he was when he acquired each piece, who he was with, what the air smelled like, what the conversation was about. They are souvenirs in the grandest sense, reminders of seasons and cities, and people who passed through his orbit. Even the storage is part of the theater. Vaults in different countries, each climate-controlled, each protected by layers of security. In one, the diamonds are displayed on black velvet under soft white lights. In another, they're locked away in simple boxes, as though downplaying their value might somehow make them safer. And so breakfast is never just breakfast. It's a stage for displaying taste, for setting the tone of the day, for weaving the threads of image and influence into something tangible. By the time the plates are cleared and the coffee cups taken away, he has already made more connections, more moves, than most people will in a month. The diamonds are back in their cases, the watch is on his wrist, and Teodoro is ready to step into the rest of the day, dressed, fed, and as always, unmistakably in control. The oil that runs beneath Equatorial Guinea is not just a resource, it is the engine of everything in Teodoro's world. Long before he was old enough to understand its significance, it was already transforming his country, reshaping skylines, and rewriting the balance of power. By the time he steps into adulthood, it is the single thread connecting the presidential palace in Malabo to boardrooms in Houston, Paris, and Beijing. The wells lie offshore, hidden beneath the dark swells of the Gulf of Guinea. From the coastline, you can sometimes see the faint silhouette of rigs against the horizon, steel giants rising from the sea, blinking red lights into the night. It's here that the money begins its journey, extracted from the earth and converted into the fuel that powers global industries. But before it becomes gasoline, or plastic, or electricity, it passes through the hands of governments, companies, and individuals who decide its fate. For Equatorial Guinea, the oil boom of the 1990s and 2000s is a shockwave. GDP soars, international attention follows, and the once quiet nation finds itself courted by some of the largest corporations in the world. Deals are signed in air-conditioned offices high above city streets, and the revenues flow, first into state accounts, and then, inevitably, into the channels controlled by those at the very top. This is where Teodoro's story intersects with the machinery of the state. His father, as president, oversees the contracts, the partnerships, the allocation of rights. Teodoro learns the process not from textbooks, but from proximity. He is present in the room when foreign executives arrive with carefully rehearsed pitches. He hears the coded language of negotiations, the way numbers are discussed without ever being said out loud. He watches as agreements are toasted over champagne, as signatures are followed by quiet exchanges in corners of the room. The oil wealth changes the very texture of life in Malabo. Roads are paved, hotels built, a new conference center rises near the waterfront. But for the vast majority of citizens, the promise of oil remains a distant echo. Salaries inch upward, but so do prices. Infrastructure appears, but access remains uneven. The gap between the lives of the elite and everyone else becomes a chasm. For Teodoro, oil is both the foundation and the shield. It funds the yachts, the cars, the estates, but it also buys influence abroad. When questioned about his wealth in international media, the unspoken answer is always the same. Oil makes this possible. It is the invisible passport that allows him to move through the world in ways that most heads of state would envy. Many people still think that the oil is simply inherited wealth, that it pours into his accounts automatically, without effort or strategy. But those close to him know he plays a more active role. So, what do you think? Is he merely the beneficiary of a system, or is he shaping it to suit his own ends? He cultivates relationships with executives from the oil majors, ExxonMobil, Marathon, Total, and others. These are not casual acquaintances. They are cultivated over years through shared dinners in Paris, private meetings in Geneva, and well-timed appearances at industry conferences. The connections run both ways. Companies secure access to lucrative drilling rights, while Teodoro ensures that the right doors stay open when needed. In some cases, oil revenue doesn't just flow into visible assets. It moves through complex channels, offshore accounts, investment vehicles, discrete real estate acquisitions in cities where wealth can vanish into anonymity. These are not moves made lightly. They are the result of careful advice from lawyers, bankers, and fixers whose own fortunes depend on keeping the machine running smoothly. Even the symbols of oil wealth are carefully chosen. When he attends an international energy summit, the suit is bespoke, the watch understated but expensive, the arrival timed to draw just enough attention without seeming gauche. He doesn't need to remind anyone why he's there. His presence alone is a reminder of the reserves beneath Equatorial Guinea's waters. Back home, the oil story is told differently. Government channels speak of national development, of investments in education and healthcare. The official photographs show Teodoro cutting ribbons at new facilities, shaking hands with workers, smiling beneath banners that proclaim progress. These moments play well on local television. But to those who know the true scale of the oil wealth, they are just the tip of the iceberg. And so the oil keeps flowing, the rigs keep pumping, and the ships keep leaving the Gulf, carrying with them not just crude, but the lifeblood of a lifestyle that is both admired and criticized. For Teodoro, it is more than money. It is the architecture of his influence, the unbroken thread linking him to boardrooms, ballrooms, and backrooms on every continent. The invitations are never printed, they are whispered. A dinner in Paris, a weekend in Los Angeles, a yacht party off the coast of Sardinia. These gatherings exist in the kind of rarefied air where the guest list is worth more than the venue. Teodoro's circle is not made up of just politicians or businessmen. It is a constellation of names that, in most contexts, would never share the same table. There's the Grammy-winning rapper who flies in from New York just for a night, the model whose face graces the covers of European fashion magazines, the film producer who can greenlight a $100 million blockbuster with a single phone call. And between them, scattered like stars, are the friends who don't appear in the press. Wealthy heirs, quiet magnates, princes without kingdoms, but with fortunes to match. Teodoro moves among them like a host born for the role. He knows how to introduce a shy designer to a bold musician, how to seat a talkative actor beside a reserved diplomat, so that by dessert they're leaning in, whispering like old friends. The dinners are more than social events. They're laboratories for influence. Deals are floated, collaborations imagined, alliances quietly formed between courses. The settings shift, but the formula remains. In Malibu, it's the terrace overlooking the Pacific, candles flickering in the evening breeze. In Paris, it's a long table in a private salon at Maxim's, walls lined with mirrors that reflect the glitter of jewelry and glassware. On the yacht, It's an open deck beneath a blanket of Mediterranean stars, the water lapping softly against the hull. Music is always present, but never intrusive. A jazz trio in the corner, a curated playlist humming softly from hidden speakers, or a guest who sits at the piano after dinner, coaxing out melodies that make conversation slow and eyes close. The food is art on porcelain, truffles shaved over handmade pasta, fresh lobster flown in that morning, desserts sculpted into impossible shapes. Many people still think that these gatherings are pure hedonism, an endless carousel of indulgence. But those in the room understand that every guest is there for a reason. So what do you think? Is it all pleasure, or is it a carefully designed ecosystem where friendship and influence are indistinguishable? Sometimes the moments are small but telling. In Paris, during Fashion Week, a model friend mentions her difficulty securing funding for a creative project. By the end of the night, she's been introduced to 2 potential backers, one a tech investor from Dubai, the other a South American media mogul. In Los Angeles, a director lamenting the difficulty of casting an international star receives an introduction to a European agent before the main course is cleared. The yacht parties are another level entirely. Guests are ferried out in sleek tenders, the city lights shrinking behind them. On deck, there's a sense of liberation. No paparazzi, no bystanders, only the sea and the carefully chosen few. Conversations take on a confessional tone, voices dropping as the champagne flows. By dawn, some will have forged bonds that last years. Others will have floated away like the night itself. The friendships formed here are fluid. Some last decades, built on mutual benefit and genuine connection. Others are intense bursts, burning brightly for a season before fading into polite distance. Teodoro understands this cycle and never clings too tightly. He knows that in the world he inhabits, people orbit each other in patterns that change with opportunity and circumstance. What remains constant is the reputation. In every city that matters, there are people who speak of his dinners, his parties, his presence with a mix of awe and intrigue. For some, it is the memory of a conversation that altered the course of their career. For others, it is simply the fact that for one night, they stood on the inside of a circle that most will only ever glimpse from afar. In the end, the glitter of these nights is not in the gold or the diamonds or the view. It's in the way they make people feel. To be there is to feel chosen, part of a story being written in real time. And for Teodoro, that feeling is as valuable as any deal struck or alliance forged. It is the currency that ensures the invitations will always be accepted. The Paris penthouse is not just a home. It is a stage, a fortress, and a statement rolled into one. Tucked in the 8th arrondissement, overlooking the elegant sweep of Avenue Montaigne, it occupies an entire top floor of a historic Haussmann building. From the street, its facade blends with the understated grandeur of its neighbors. But inside, it is something else entirely. The elevator opens directly into a marble-floored foyer, the kind of entrance where every footstep echoes. To the left, a salon with floor-to-ceiling windows frames the Eiffel Tower like a painting. At night, when the tower begins to sparkle, the entire room seems to inhale the light. The walls are hung with art, some pieces by modern masters, others by artists whose names aren't yet famous but soon will be. Each was chosen for more than beauty. Each has a story that Teodoro can tell in detail, usually beginning with, "I found this in," followed by a city and a night most people could only imagine. The penthouse becomes his European headquarters. Paris offers proximity to the world's fashion, art, and luxury markets, as well as the anonymity that wealth can buy in a city accustomed to the presence of the ultra-rich. The concierge can secure a table at any restaurant in the city, arrange for a private tour of a museum, or have a rare bottle of wine delivered within the hour. From here, he orchestrates his Paris life. Mornings might be spent in quiet meetings over coffee at Hotel Plaza Athénée. Afternoons are for shopping, not just for himself, but for gifts to send to friends in Los Angeles or New York. Evenings are a choice between a private dinner in the penthouse or a discreet appearance at a high society gala. He knows when to be seen and when to disappear. The interior is designed for both comfort and impact. Plush sofas in deep jewel tones invite guests to sink in, while a dining table carved from a single slab of walnut stretches almost the length of the room. In the corner of the library, a vintage Louis Vuitton trunk sits open, filled not with clothes, but with rare bottles of cognac and whiskey. The kitchen is the domain of a rotating roster of private chefs, each specializing in a different cuisine: Japanese one week, Moroccan the next, French always within reach. Many people still think that the Paris penthouse is just another indulgence in a catalog of excess. But to those in his circle, it is a base of operations as strategic as any political office. So what do you think? Is it merely a luxury address, or a command center dressed in velvet and glass? The view is part of the power. From the balcony, he can see not just the Eiffel Tower, but the slow pulse of the city's wealth moving through the streets below. Black cars pulling up to hotels, couples stepping into boutiques, waiters in crisp white aprons darting between tables at sidewalk cafes. Paris hums with the kind of energy that makes deals happen over a glance, a handshake, a shared bottle of wine. And then there are the private gatherings. Unlike the sprawling parties in Malibu, these are smaller, more deliberate affairs. A handful of guests seated around the walnut table, the conversation flowing as effortlessly as the wine. Here, he talks less and listens more, noting which names are dropped, which alliances are hinted at, which opportunities might be worth chasing. The penthouse also serves as a sanctuary. There are mornings when the curtains stay drawn, when the only sounds are the soft hiss of the espresso machine and the rustle of the newspaper. In those moments, Paris feels like it belongs entirely to him. No photographers, no meetings, no schedules, just the quiet luxury of a city that doesn't need to be conquered, only enjoyed. It is said that you can tell a man by the way he keeps his home. In the case of Teodoro, the penthouse says everything. He is a man who knows the value of beauty, who understands the theater of location, and who has mastered the art of making the extraordinary feel effortless. The address is as much a part of his identity as his suits or his cars, a fixed point in a life that moves constantly, but always on his terms. The first time he steps into the hushed auction room at Sotheby's, it feels like crossing an invisible border into a world where wealth has its own language and its own gravity. The air is still but charged, the soft rustle of catalog pages mixing with the muted footsteps of staff in tailored black suits. Every object in this room is more than an object. It is a piece of history, a story with a price tag that will soon be rewritten by the highest bidder. Teodoro sits near the middle, far enough from the front to observe, close enough that the auctioneer will see his hand if he chooses to raise it. The walls are lined with pieces, paintings, sculptures, rare antiques, each with a description that could fill a book. He studies them not just as art, but as currency. In this room, the right purchase can open a door, forge a connection or place you in a select club of collectors whose conversations rarely make the news. The first item he buys is a painting, a bold, abstract work by a European master whose value has been steadily climbing for decades. The bidding starts modestly, but when his paddle goes up, it stays up until the room knows he will not stop. When the gavel finally falls, there's a subtle ripple of acknowledgement. The painting will hang in his Paris penthouse for a time before moving to another property, but its real value lies in the way it cements his presence in this world. Soon, he develops a rhythm. Sotheby's in London, Christie's in New York, smaller, more discreet auctions in Geneva and Dubai. He bids in person when the spectacle serves him, sends representatives when a quieter approach is better. He learns the power of timing, buying certain artists just before they explode in value, selling others when the market is at its peak. The collections grow. African masks carved a century ago, their wood darkened by time and touch. A set of Art Deco furniture from a Parisian apartment that once hosted poets and revolutionaries. A rare watch commissioned for a European monarch. Its dial a miniature painting of a hunting scene. These are not mere acquisitions. They are the raw material of identity. Each piece chosen because it says something about the man who owns it. Many people still think that his art buying is just another excess, a way to hang money on the walls. But the truth is more strategic. So what do you think? Is it all decoration? Or is it an investment portfolio disguised as aesthetics? The art also becomes a language he uses with his guests. At a dinner in Malibu, he might lead a visiting musician to a sculpture and tell the story of its creator, a recluse who worked in a single room for 50 years. In Paris, he might pour a glass of wine for a designer and point out a subtle detail in a painting that mirrors the lines of their latest collection. These are conversations that deepen relationships without ever speaking directly about money or politics. His purchases attract attention, not all of it welcome. Journalists note the scale of his acquisitions, sometimes with admiration, often with suspicion. But art is difficult to trace, and even harder to value definitively. A piece might be worth millions, or only what someone is willing to pay. It is a market built as much on perception as on fact. In private moments, he walks through his own collections like a curator in a museum closed to the public. He pauses before certain works, remembering the room where he first saw them, the tension of the bidding, the relief when the gavel fell. Some pieces he loves too much to ever sell. Others are placeholders, bought because they will appreciate, destined to move quietly from one collection to another when the time is right. In this world, ownership is power. To own is to decide whether something is seen, who sees it, and under what circumstances. For Teodoro, the art is more than beauty. It is leverage, reputation, and a way of making sure that his presence is felt even in rooms where he is not physically present. In a world where seconds can cost more than cars, Teodoro's watch collection is less an accessory cabinet and more a chronicle of his life. Time to him is not measured in hours. It's measured in craftsmanship, in the weight of gold and the gleam of sapphire glass, in the story behind every gear and spring. Each watch he owns has a provenance, a history, a place in the greater mosaic of his image. The first high-end watch he buys for himself is a Patek Philippe. It's understated compared to the flash of his cars and jewelry. Platinum case, a moon phase complication, an alligator leather strap. But the people who know, know. Wearing a Patek in certain circles is a silent handshake, a way of saying, I understand the rules here. He wears it not to parties, but to meetings, letting it peek from beneath a shirt cuff when he signs documents or raises a glass. Then there's the Richard Mille, a different language entirely. Bold, almost futuristic in design, skeletonized to show the intricate movement within. This is a watch that announces itself across the room, a machine that costs more than some penthouses and yet can withstand the force of a Formula One driver's lap. When he wears the Mille, it's often with casual clothes, as if to say that luxury should be as comfortable as breathing. Over time, the collection expands to include Audemar's Piguet Royal Oaks, Vacheron Constantin Tourbillon, and even a few vintage Rolex Daytonas, pieces that have crossed decades without losing relevance. He commissions custom dials in rare colors, matching them to suits or even cars. Some watches are purchased through official channels, others through the whispered world of private dealers, where deals are made over espresso in back rooms, the watches emerging from unmarked cases, lined and suede. Many people still think that his watches are just props, status symbols strapped to his wrist. But in truth, each is a piece of currency. So what do you think? Is this simply vanity, or is it an unspoken investment strategy that also serves as armor in a world obsessed with appearances? In certain circles, a man's watch tells more about him than his words. At an international energy conference, the Patek says patience, heritage, long-term thinking. At a celebrity yacht party, the Richard Mille says speed, exclusivity, and a willingness to embrace risk. Each choice is deliberate, calculated to align with the room he's walking into. The watches also become tools of connection. A fellow collector spots the rare green dial Daytona on his wrist and strikes up a conversation. By the end of the evening, they're discussing a potential real estate partnership in Monaco. A jeweler notices the limited edition Royal Oak concept and offers him first refusal on a piece that hasn't even been announced to the public yet. Some watches are never worn outside his private spaces. These are museum-grade pieces. A Breguet from the 19th century with its original box, a Patek Philippe World Time with a cloisonné enamel dial depicting Africa in exquisite miniature. He keeps these in a vault, bringing them out only for himself or for guests who will truly understand their significance. There is a quiet ritual to his mornings when he's not traveling. He opens a temperature-controlled cabinet, the interior softly lit, rows of timepieces resting on windows. He'll pause, let his fingertips graze the bezels, feeling the cool weight of metal. Some days he chooses quickly, other days he lingers, matching the watch to his mood, his plans, or the unspoken statement he wants to make before he's even said hello. And like the cars, the watches are maintained with an almost obsessive care. Servicing is done only by the manufacturer, parts replaced only when absolutely necessary, polishing kept to a minimum to preserve the sharp lines of the cases. Each watch is documented, photographed, insured, a curated archive of mechanical perfection. For Teodoro, time is more than a commodity. It is a stage on which he can display the precision, taste, and control that define his public persona. Every tick, every sweep of the second hand is another reminder that in his world, nothing is accidental, not even the way he measures the hours. The yacht is more than a vessel. It is a floating empire, stretching over 250 feet from bow to stern. It gleams like a blade in the Mediterranean sun, its sleek lines cutting through the water with the grace of something alive. The hull is painted in a deep midnight blue that almost swallows the reflections of the sea, while the decks above gleam with polished teak, each plank maintained with the same precision as a museum floor. From a distance, it is impressive. Up close, it is overwhelming. Boarding is a small ceremony in itself. Guests step onto the gangway where they are greeted by a crew in immaculate uniforms, the air scented faintly of salt and citrus. There are fresh flowers in the reception hall, chilled champagne ready in crystal flutes, and the soft hum of engines felt more than heard. The yacht has 5 decks. On the main, there's a salon with floor-to-ceiling windows, plush seating in cream leather, and a grand piano that has hosted impromptu performances from musicians whose names are known on every continent. A spiral staircase leads up to a dining room large enough to seat 20, its table set with Limoges china and silver flatware engraved with his initials. The cabins are suites in their own right, king-sized beds, marble bathrooms, and balconies that open directly onto the sea. The master suite occupies nearly the entire forward section of one deck, with 180-degree views that turn sunrise into a private spectacle. There's a study with a walnut desk, a walk-in wardrobe that rivals those in his land-based properties, and a private terrace where he can take breakfast without another soul in sight. Below deck, the yacht hides its luxuries as carefully as it displays them above. There's a cinema with velvet armchairs, a fully equipped gym, and a spa with a massage room and sauna. A glass-walled pool on the aft deck seems to pour into the ocean, and from the jacuzzi above, the horizon stretches unbroken in every direction. This yacht is not just for leisure. It is a mobile stage for diplomacy, business, and influence. Deals have been discussed over sunset dinners at anchor, agreements sealed with a handshake as the lights of Monaco or St. Bart's twinkle in the background. It is an environment where distractions are few, privacy is absolute, and every detail, from the temperature of the wine to the angle of the cushions, has been considered in advance. Many people still think that the yacht is simply a plaything, an extravagant indulgence for summers in the Mediterranean. But those who have been aboard know it is also a weapon of persuasion. So what do you think? Is it just leisure, or is it a strategic arena dressed in teak and silk? One summer in Ibiza, he hosts a weekend gathering that blends both worlds. Mornings begin with guests diving into the clear water. Afternoons see them sprawled on sun loungers while DJs spin low, steady beats. As the sun sets, the yacht becomes a dining hall, candlelight glinting off glassware as plates of seafood and truffle pasta are served. Later, as the coastline glows faintly in the distance, smaller groups slip away to private corners, conversations shifting from music to investments, from gossip to concrete plans. Even the crew are part of the performance. They move with precision, anticipating needs before they're spoken, refilling a glass, adjusting a sunshade, discreetly clearing away a plate without interrupting a conversation. Guests leave feeling that they have been cared for in a way that is almost impossible to replicate on land. The yacht also serves as a sanctuary. In certain moments, with no guests aboard, he'll stand alone at the bow in the early morning, the sea stretching endless before him, the air cool and sharp. These are rare intervals of solitude in a life built around presence, a reminder that the ocean's vastness dwarfs even the greatest fortunes. When the season ends, the yacht doesn't simply dock and wait. It undergoes refits, upgrades, and careful maintenance. New technology is installed, interiors are refreshed, menus are updated. Because in Teodorine's world, Even a floating palace can't be allowed to feel anything less than current. Wherever it sails, the yacht sends the same message. Its owner commands not just the land, but the sea. And in the quiet space between the waves and the horizon, it carries both the man and the myth that surrounds him. In the glossy exterior of his life, the mansions, the yachts, the cars, there is a part of the story that doesn't make the society pages. It is found not in Malibu or Paris, but back in Malabo, where the heat clings to the streets and the air hums with the sound of generators. Here, in the capital of Equatorial Guinea, the shadow of politics and the weight of power press closer than anywhere else. At home, the image is more complex. He is not just the oil prince or the international playboy. He is the president's son, heir to a political dynasty that has ruled for decades. The people know his face on billboards, in state broadcasts, at public events, but their perception of him depends on where they stand in the country's hierarchy. For the loyalists, he is the symbol of continuity, a young man who embodies the future of the regime. For others, he is the embodiment of the gulf between the ruling elite and the rest of the nation. Walking through the streets here is different from walking the boulevards of Paris or the sidewalks of Beverly Hills. Security is visible and constant. Convoys move with precision, their tinted windows revealing nothing. Crowds gather, not to snap photos for social media, but to observe silently, to measure their distance. In the markets, women sell fruit under tattered umbrellas. Children run barefoot between stalls, and the unevenness of wealth is stark. Inside the palace compound, it is another world. Lush gardens stretch across the grounds, their paths shaded by imported palms. Fountains gurgle softly in the heat, and the sound of laughter drifts from private courtyards. Meetings here are not scheduled by app. They are arranged through layers of protocol, every visitor vetted, every moment accounted for. Teodoro has learned to navigate this contrast. When he returns from his travels, he knows how to shift his tone, how to present himself as the dutiful son and political figure rather than the celebrity host. His suits are still tailored, but the colors are more muted. His public remarks focus on development, infrastructure, and the future of the nation. He visits schools, opens clinics, and stands beside his father at military parades, the two of them framed by the flags of a country they control absolutely. Many people still think that his appearances at home are mere formality, a way to tick the boxes of political expectation. But others suspect he is also testing the waters, learning the mechanics of public leadership, studying how to stand not just beside the president, but in his place. So what do you think? Is this performance, or is it preparation? Beneath the official schedule, there are whispers. Some say the people closest to him worry about the optics of his lifestyle abroad, how the images of yachts and Bugattis play against the realities on the ground. Others argue that his global persona strengthens his position, making him a figure too visible, too connected to be sidelined. In the inner circles, these debates are not casual. They are strategies, weighed and considered behind closed doors. In quieter moments, he walks the palace gardens alone, the scent of jasmine rising in the evening air. He knows the history of these grounds, how they have been both a refuge and a fortress for his family. He understands the risks of power as well as its privileges. The security walls are high for a reason. There is also the matter of loyalty, his to the family, the family's to him, and the shifting loyalties of those around them. In politics, he knows, loyalty is never unconditional. It must be cultivated, rewarded, and sometimes bought outright. This is a lesson learned not in textbooks, but by watching his father hold on to power for longer than most rulers in the modern world. When the motorcade leaves the compound and rolls through Malabo's streets, the reactions are mixed. Some wave, some watch in silence. All know that the convoy represents more than one man. It represents the structure of power that shapes every aspect of life here. And so, the shadows at home are not just political, they are personal. They are the weight of expectation, the scrutiny of the public, and the knowledge that while the world may see him as a man of leisure, here he is also a man of responsibility, whether he wants it or not. The scrutiny turns into something sharper when the first hints of legal trouble surface beyond the borders of Equatorial Guinea. At first, it's little more than a murmur. Articles in niche financial publications, occasional questions from journalists who have done their homework. But slowly, the headlines grow louder, the questions more pointed. Governments in the West begin to look not just at the man, but at the money. It starts in the United States, where investigators quietly open files that trace the path of oil revenue and public funds. The allegations are not subtle. Misappropriation, embezzlement, laundering wealth through high-value assets. In France, the term biens mal acquis, ill-gotten gains, enters the conversation. The phrase appears in court documents, in press conferences, in interviews with activists who have been tracking the spending habits of African elites for years. For a man whose image has been built on the idea of control, this is dangerous territory. Investigations mean subpoenas, raids, and the possibility of having his prized possessions seized, not because he can't pay for them, but because of how he paid for them. In Paris, the police take note of his penthouse, the art on the walls, the garage beneath it, filled with rare cars. In Malibu, American authorities begin to ask questions about the $30 million estate with the panoramic ocean view. The press coverage is relentless. Tabloids reduce his life to a caricature. The Playboy prince with a fleet of supercars and a taste for champagne fountains. Serious newspapers run long-form features detailing the gap between Equatorial Guinea's oil wealth and the poverty experienced by most of its citizens. The contrast is too sharp for the narrative to fade away quickly. Many people still think that these legal moves are purely symbolic, a way for Western governments to posture about corruption without truly challenging the systems that enable it. But others believe they represent real danger, a crack in the armor of someone who has, until now, seemed untouchable. So what do you think? Is this a warning shot or the start of something deeper? For Teodoro, the response is to lean into what he does best, the performance of presence. He doesn't vanish. He attends events, appears at official functions, and continues to host gatherings abroad. If the world expects him to retreat in shame, it will be disappointed. The message is subtle but clear. He is still moving, still visible, still operating at the same altitude. Behind the scenes, lawyers work full-time to contest seizures, negotiate settlements, and stall proceedings. The strategy is twofold: fight when the odds are good, and delay when they aren't. In France, he challenges the jurisdiction of the courts. In the United States, he hires firms that specialize in high-profile defense, their offices filled with degrees from Ivy League law schools and photographs of past victories. At home, the narrative is different. State media frames the investigations as political attacks on Equatorial Guinea itself, attempts by foreign powers to undermine its sovereignty. His public appearances are covered extensively. His speeches focused on national pride, development projects, and the importance of defending the country's interests against outside interference. But the pressure is real. Certain trips are postponed. Certain purchases are delayed. The quiet luxury of moving without friction begins to erode. Customs checks that used to be waved away now involve polite but firm questions. Bank transfers take longer, subject to routine verifications. Associates who once flaunted their connection to him start to be more discreet, and yet, in the middle of this, he still manages moments of theatrical defiance. Driving through Paris in a rare sports car, pulling up to a hotel where photographers are already waiting, hosting a dinner in Los Angeles where the guest list is as glittering as ever, posting carefully chosen images to social media that show life continuing at the same level of opulence, as if the legal clouds are nothing more than background weather. For a man like Teodoro, the battle is not just in the courts, it's in the realm of perception. As long as he can control the story, or at least complicate it, there is a chance that the myth will outlast the headlines. And in his world, survival often comes down to exactly that. The morning the Paris raid happens, the city is waking up in its usual rhythm. Bakeries opening, traffic swelling, the first cafe tables filling with locals in scarves and overcoats. But on Avenue Foch, one of the city's most exclusive addresses, the air feels different. The quiet hum of wealth is interrupted by the low murmur of voices, the sudden flash of blue police lights reflecting off polished facades. Just after dawn, French investigators arrive at his penthouse. The doors are opened not by invitation, but by legal authority. Officers move with a calm efficiency that suggests every step has been planned in advance. They have warrants for the property, the garage, and the storage spaces that hold some of his most prized possessions. It is the kind of moment designed for impact, not just to seize, but to send a message. Inside, they find the treasures the press has long speculated about. A collection of supercars parked like jewels in a vault. Ferraris, Bugattis, Maseratis, each in showroom condition, each worth enough to buy entire apartment buildings in the city below. Paintings come down from walls with gloved hands, their frames wrapped in protective cloth before being slid into crates. Jewelry is cataloged, from diamond bracelets to gold cufflinks, each piece tagged and photographed. The inventory reads like something from a modern fairy tale of excess. Rare watches worth hundreds of thousands, bespoke suits still in their garment bags, bottles of wine older than their owner. The investigators document everything, their lenses capturing a version of his life that the public will soon see splashed across headlines. Many people still think that raids like this are theater, that the purpose is less about confiscating property and more about shaping the narrative. But others believe that this is the legal system's most direct move against a lifestyle long suspected to be built on misused state wealth. So what do you think? Is this enforcement or spectacle? For Teodoro, the news travels fast. Within hours, the world's media has the images. Trucks loaded with confiscated cars, art packed into crates, the street outside cordoned off with police tape. In Los Angeles, in Malibu, in Malabo, phones ring and messages fly. Friends send guarded notes. Allies in politics and business watch to see how he will respond. Publicly, he says nothing. No interviews, no statements. His silence fuels speculation, allowing others to narrate the event in ways that serve their own agendas. State media in Equatorial Guinea frames it as a politically motivated attack, an insult to the sovereignty of the nation. In Paris, the coverage leans into the drama. The raid described as one of the largest seizures of luxury goods in the country's history. Behind closed doors, lawyers begin the slow work of contesting the seizures, arguing over jurisdiction, ownership, and procedure. Each item becomes a case study. Who bought it? When? With which funds? Through which channels? The process is tedious, but it's a shield. Every procedural question is a delay. Every delay a way to keep the machinery of confiscation from grinding forward too quickly. In the meantime, the raid becomes part of the myth. Supporters point to it as proof that he is important enough to be targeted by the West. Critics see it as confirmation of everything they've been saying for years. Either way, his name stays in the conversation, and in the world of influence, that's its own form of survival. The penthouse doesn't stay empty for long. Even stripped of some of its treasures, it remains an address that speaks louder than any headline. The view still captures the Eiffel Tower. The marble floors still shine. And for a man who understands the performance of power, even an empty stage can be made to look full again. The legal storm that follows the Paris raid doesn't arrive as a sudden crash. It comes in waves. Court dates are set, postponed, rescheduled. Paperwork flows between Paris, Malabo, and Geneva, each packet of documents carrying the weight of both accusation and defense. The French prosecutors move with deliberate care, gathering evidence that they hope will hold up not just in a courtroom, but in the court of public opinion. For Teodoro, the courtroom is another kind of stage, though the atmosphere here is stripped of glamour. The wood-paneled chambers smell faintly of polish and old paper, the air heavy with quiet tension. He arrives in dark, perfectly tailored suits, expression neutral, a man determined not to give the cameras what they want. His lawyers flank him like bodyguards in bespoke ties, their briefcases filled with arguments honed to the sharpness of a blade. The charges are complex, built on years of transactions, property purchases, art acquisitions, luxury goods, that the prosecutors allege were funded through misappropriated public money. The defense counters with a narrative of legitimate business ventures, personal income, and the assertion that foreign courts have no jurisdiction over the spending habits of a foreign official. It is a clash of stories. As much as it is a clash of laws, many people still think that these trials are less about justice and more about political theater, an attempt to make an example of one man as a symbol of a larger problem. But others argue that they represent a genuine attempt to pierce the armor of wealth and influence. So what do you think? Is this accountability or a headline-making show? In court, the details spill out. Lists of seized cars, inventories of watches, valuations of properties from Malibu to Paris. Auction records show millions spent on art. Bank statements trace the flow of funds through offshore accounts and shell companies, some with names so vague they could belong to anything. Each exhibit is a window into the life the public has only glimpsed in photographs. Through it all, he sits still, speaking only when addressed directly by the judge. His voice is calm, deliberate, almost detached. He does not flinch when the prosecutor reads out the estimated value of his confiscated assets, nor when photographs of his Malibu mansion flash across the courtroom screens. To react would be to concede that the performance has touched him, and that is something he will not give. Outside, journalists cluster on the courthouse steps, their breath fogging in the morning air. Protesters sometimes gather, holding signs about corruption and inequality. Others, supporters or simply the curious, stand nearby, craning their necks for a glimpse of the man at the center of the storm. Every entrance and exit is photographed, every movement parsed for meaning. Behind the scenes, The trial affects his movements. Certain countries become off-limits due to the risk of arrest or asset seizure. Travel requires more planning, more discretion. But it does not stop. He still appears in the places that matter: private clubs in London, art fairs in Basel, exclusive galas in Dubai, just enough to signal that life continues. The French proceedings are not the only ones. In the United States, a separate case winds through the system, focused on the Malibu estate, the private jet, the Michael Jackson memorabilia collection he once owned. There, too, the allegations echo the same theme: that his lifestyle has been financed in ways that breach the line between personal wealth and public resources. And yet, for all the headlines and the legal arguments, he remains untouched by prison walls. Settlements are discussed, fines floated, assets traded for the quiet closing of a file. In this way, the courtroom drama becomes part of his narrative, another chapter in which the outcome is not total victory, but survival. In the end, when the session adjourns and the lawyers gather their papers, he leaves the courthouse the way he entered it: measured steps, unreadable face, the cameras flashing in a frenzy behind him. Because in his world, as long as he walks out the door under his own power, the story is still his to tell. By now, the headlines have pushed his name into the global conversation, and the image they paint is sharp: Africa's ultimate Playboy Don, living in cinematic excess, while courtrooms on 2 continents try to pull at the seams of his empire. But if the world thinks this will drive him into hiding, they don't know Teodoro. His instinct is not retreat, it is recalibration. When the noise grows loud abroad, he leans more heavily on the bastion of home. Malabo becomes his fortress, the place where no subpoena can reach him without crossing layers of political protection. Within the palace compound, the tempo of life changes. There are more official appearances, inaugurations of new buildings, speeches about economic progress, visits to rural areas where cameras capture him shaking hands with farmers and schoolchildren. These events are broadcast on national television, framed to show him as a servant of the people, rather than a man under siege. State media emphasizes his role in development projects. Roads are paved, hospitals renovated, housing schemes announced. His name is attached to foundations that sponsor scholarships and medical programs. Whether these projects are fully funded or quietly symbolic doesn't matter. The optics are the point. For domestic audiences, the image of the embattled prince abroad transforms into that of a patriot defending the nation from foreign interference. Many people still think that this return to the home stage is damage control, a tactic to shield himself from international scrutiny. But others see it as a calculated pivot, strengthening his internal legitimacy in preparation for the day when the family's political dynasty might need a successor. So what do you think? Is this self-preservation or a dress rehearsal for leadership? The sanctuary of Malabo is not without its own theater. Invitations go out for private gatherings, smaller now, but still lavish, where allies from across Africa arrive discreetly. Ministers from neighboring countries, business magnates with stakes in oil and mining, cultural icons from music and sport, all find their way to these evenings. Here, discussions flow more freely than in formal summits. Deals are sketched out over late-night drinks, and promises are exchanged under the understanding that no one in the room will speak of them outside its walls. Security is ever present. Guests are ferried from the airport in tinted convoys, their arrivals timed so as not to overlap in ways that might invite speculation. The compound itself hums with vigilance. Guards at every turn, cameras tracking every approach. The outer walls keep the world at bay, The inner circle keeps him untouchable. When he travels within the country, it is in motorcades that remind everyone of his position. Roads are cleared, villages prepare welcomes, children wave flags. These trips are covered extensively by local media, each report reinforcing the image of a leader in waiting. Whether he's handing out school supplies or inspecting infrastructure projects, the subtext is the same. He is not just a man of yachts and suits. He is also a man of the soil, connected to his people. At night, in the quieter spaces of the palace, the tone shifts. Advisors meet in small rooms, mapping the geopolitical landscape, assessing which allies abroad can still be counted on, and which might turn under pressure. The legal troubles are monitored, but they are only one piece of a larger puzzle, the future of the Obiang dynasty, and here lies the paradox. The same global notoriety that makes him a target also makes him, in some ways, indispensable. Few others in the family command the same mix of visibility, charisma, and ruthlessness. In a political climate where image is as much a weapon as policy, that combination is difficult to replace. So the retreat to Malabo is not just a withdrawal, it's a consolidation. Like a chess player bringing the most important pieces back to the center of the board, Teodoro is positioning himself where he is strongest, waiting for the next move to be his. The shift in strategy becomes clearer as he starts to reframe his public persona, not by erasing the past, but by layering something new over it. The Playboy image remains, but now it is tempered with a narrative of responsibility. He begins to appear at charity events with a frequency that suggests intent, each one staged with precision to convey warmth, generosity, and an almost statesman-like gravity. In Malabo, a gala dinner is held to raise funds for children's health initiatives. The ballroom is lit in soft gold, the tables heavy with flowers, the menu crafted by a Michelin-starred chef brought in from Europe. Every seat is occupied by a carefully curated guest: government ministers, foreign diplomats, business leaders, and prominent members of the local elite. Cameras are positioned to capture the moment he takes the stage, his voice low and deliberate as he speaks about the importance of investing in the nation's youth. The donations flow generously, but the real currency exchanged here is image. Photographs of the event make their way into newspapers and online outlets, showing him not in a club or on a yacht, but standing beside children receiving medical care or presenting oversized checks to community leaders. In these images, the suit is still custom-tailored, but the tone is different. The indulgence is in the setting, not in the man. Abroad, similar moves are made. In Paris, he funds an African art exhibition, ensuring his name appears on the opening night program alongside respected cultural figures. In Dubai, he sponsors a sports tournament that draws athletes from across the continent, framing it as an effort to promote unity and opportunity. These events attract coverage that can sit alongside the more critical headlines, softening the edges of his public profile. Many people still think that these gestures are purely performative, designed to counterbalance years of extravagance. But others see them as an evolution, a recognition that influence in the modern world requires more than wealth. It demands the appearance of purpose. So what do you think? Is this reinvention or just redecoration? The charity projects are not without substance. Some hospitals do receive new equipment. Some students are sent abroad on scholarships. But these successes are amplified far beyond their scale. each one folded into a broader narrative that he is a man maturing into a role of greater responsibility. It is an artful blend, doing enough good to point to when challenged, but doing it in ways that also serve the architecture of his reputation. Those closest to him note the change in his schedule. There are fewer all-night parties, more working lunches with advisors, more appearances at events where the guest list is drawn from the world of politics rather than celebrity. The shift is not total. He still flies to Ibiza in the summer, still keeps the Malibu mansion for long stays, but there is a deliberate balancing act in play. At the same time, he does not shy away from maintaining his connections to the worlds that built his image. He still attends Fashion Week in Paris, still bids at high-profile art auctions, still keeps his name in the circles of the rich and famous. But now, the photographs are more likely to show him seated beside a head of state than a pop star. It is a careful calibration, one that acknowledges the reality of his legal battles and the potential future of his political ambitions. By weaving philanthropy and cultural patronage into his public life, he is crafting a narrative in which the yachts and supercars are no longer the whole story, but rather the backdrop to a more serious figure. And in this reframing, there is a quiet recognition of something deeper, that power, like wealth, must be tended to. It must evolve, adapt, and present itself in ways that fit the moment. The Playboy prince is still there, but now he wears the mantle of benefactor as well. A man who can, when it suits him, appear to trade champagne flutes for charity banquets without missing a step. If the outside world is becoming more selective about where he can move, within Malabo and the wider region, he still commands the kind of mobility most leaders envy. His wealth flows now not only through luxury purchases, but through the invisible channels of offshore banking and discreet corporate networks. The public might see the cars and the suits, but the real game, the one that keeps the machine running, is in the offshore shuffle. From his private study, often late at night, the lights of the city faint in the distance, he meets with a tight circle of financial advisors. They speak the language of shell companies, nominee directors, and multi-layered trusts. Documents are reviewed not in stacks of paper, but on encrypted tablets, with secure calls linking them to lawyers in Zurich, bankers in Singapore, and corporate agents in the British Virgin Islands. The structure is deliberate. A property in London might be owned not by him directly, but by a holding company registered in Panama, which in turn is controlled by a trust in Guernsey. A yacht might be flagged in the Cayman Islands, financed through a series of loans from entities that appear unrelated but are, in reality, connected through an invisible web of signatures and silent partners. This complexity is not an accident. It is a shield, a way of making ownership a question rather than a statement. Many people still think that this kind of offshore maneuvering is purely about hiding assets from investigators, but it's also about flexibility, allowing wealth to move quickly across borders without triggering alarms. So, what do you think? Is this concealment, or is it simply the modern architecture of high-level finance? In practice, the shuffle means he can adapt in real time. If a jurisdiction becomes too hot, the ownership chain can be rerouted through a friendlier port. If an asset risks seizure, it can be sold quietly, the proceeds moved into accounts beyond the reach of the original claim. There are moments when a company exists for only months, long enough to hold a piece of real estate or a bank account, before being dissolved and replaced by another. Even the timing of moves is calculated. A piece of art might be loaned to a museum, keeping it publicly visible, while technically in the possession of a different entity. A property might be rented to himself at a nominal fee, ensuring the paper trail reflects use without direct ownership. These arrangements, while complex, allow him to maintain both access and plausible deniability. The network is global, but the control remains local. Every key decision flows back through him. Trusted intermediaries manage the day-to-day, but nothing significant happens without his nod. In this way, he keeps a hand on the wheel, even as the ship sails through waters that most people will never even chart on a map. Critics point to this as proof of his determination to stay beyond reach. Supporters frame it as smart stewardship, the kind of financial acumen that ensures the family's legacy will outlast any single political cycle or court case. Both perspectives have a point. What's certain is that this offshore shuffle is as much a part of his identity as the cars and the suits. It is the unseen engine that keeps the visible world turning. And while the newspapers focus on the spectacle of seizures and court hearings, the deeper reality is that much of his empire is invisible by design. It is a system built to survive storms, to shift shape as needed, to keep the man at its center moving freely even when the walls seem to be closing in. In the polished silence of his study, signing a document that will dissolve one company and create another, Teodoro understands something most people never will. In his world, survival is not just about having wealth. It's about making sure no one can ever put their hands on all of it at once. In the corridors of global power, relationships can be worth more than oil wells. Teodoro understands this instinctively. From the moment he first stepped into international circles, he has cultivated friends in high places, not just acquaintances to toast champagne with, but alliances that can tilt outcomes, slow investigations, and open doors that otherwise remain bolted shut. Some are political leaders, presidents, prime ministers, ministers of energy and defense. Others are corporate titans, men and women whose reach extends into banking, commodities, and the media. Then, there are the quieter figures, intelligence veterans turned private consultants, international lawyers who speak in careful hypotheticals, diplomats who never appear in photographs. He doesn't collect these relationships casually. Each is approached like a long game. A quiet meeting at a hotel in Geneva might lead to a favor a year later. A well-timed gift, an African art piece, a rare vintage of wine, might secure goodwill that money alone can't buy. In return, he offers access to his network, to opportunities in Equatorial Guinea, to introductions with people who do not appear on official schedules. Some alliances are built on shared interest, oil deals that benefit both sides, real estate ventures in Europe where profits are split quietly, access to high-profile events, film festivals, art fairs, sporting finals, where the real negotiations happen in VIP lounges far from the cameras. Others are built on mutual protection. I help you when you're in the spotlight. You help me when I am. Many people still think that these friendships are superficial, a revolving door of convenience. But in his world, the bonds forged over whispered deals and shared vulnerabilities can be stronger than those made in childhood. So what do you think? Are these simply transactional, or are they the scaffolding of his survival? The power of this network becomes clearest when pressure mounts. A sudden investigation in one jurisdiction is quietly discouraged by an influential contact in another. A business deal under scrutiny is reframed in a friendly media outlet. Even travel restrictions can bend when the right person makes the right call at the right time. He is careful never to be indebted to just one ally. Too much reliance on a single figure is a weakness, a potential point of leverage. Instead, His web of connections is spread across continents and industries, ensuring that no matter where he is, someone with influence can be reached. Some relationships are public, even celebrated, appearing together at charity galas, photographed shaking hands at cultural events. Others are deliberately hidden, maintained through private channels, with meetings held in discreet villas or aboard yachts where every crew member has signed an ironclad confidentiality agreement. These friends in high places are not always aligned with each other. Some are even rivals. But in this lies another advantage. Their competition for his favor ensures that he remains valuable to both. He is a pivot point in a network of competing interests, and as long as he maintains that balance, he keeps his position. In this ecosystem, favors have no expiry date. A promise made in 2012 might be called in a decade later, long after the original circumstances have faded from public view. And each time a favor is repaid, the bond deepens, the ledger of mutual obligations grows thicker. This is the side of his life the tabloids rarely capture. There are no photographs of the late-night calls to ministers in other capitals, no headlines about the quiet interventions that keep doors open. But this is the machinery that allows the more visible parts of his life, the suits, the cars, the mansions, to exist without being dismantled. For all the spectacle that surrounds him, it is here, in the cultivated web of high-level friendships, that Teodorin's real power resides. It is not loud, it is not showy, but it is enduring. And in a world where fortunes rise and fall in a news cycle, endurance is the most valuable currency of all. In the years following the height of his notoriety, the noise from the outside world softens, not because the accusations have disappeared, but because headlines lose their novelty. International media moves on to other targets, other scandals. For Teodorin, this is a gift. It allows him to slip into what his closest advisors call the quiet years, a period of strategic low visibility in the global press, but no less opulent in reality. The shift is subtle. He's no longer photographed stepping out of a Bugatti in Paris or hosting champagne-soaked parties in Ibiza every other weekend. Instead, the imagery is carefully rationed. A single appearance at a major art auction in London, a discreet sighting at a Formula One race in Monaco, a charity gala in Dubai, where cameras capture him in a tuxedo, smiling politely beside an Emirati dignitary. Many people still think that the quiet years are a sign of retreat, a scaling back forced by legal caution. But those who know him well see something different, a calculated withdrawal, an intentional pivot from being the headline to being the man who operates between them. So what do you think? Is this retreat or the evolution of someone who understands that power often works best unseen? The reality is that the quiet years are anything but still. His private jet still logs hours across continents, Malabo to Cape Town to Doha, Doha to Geneva. The yacht still spends summers in the Mediterranean and winters in the Caribbean, though guest lists are smaller now, limited to those who are more ally than audience. Inside his properties, life carries on at the same pitch. In Malibu, dinners are smaller, but the chef still prepares multi-course meals paired with rare wines. In Paris, the penthouse still hosts evenings where business and pleasure blur so seamlessly that it's hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. He spends more time on the mechanics of wealth during this period. The offshore shuffle continues, fine-tuned to adjust to changes in banking regulations and geopolitical winds. New companies are created, some dissolved, assets quietly transferred from one jurisdiction to another. The empire remains fluid, its true size and scope known only to a handful of trusted confidants. travel now has a different flavor. The parties are still there, but they are no longer public performances. They are controlled environments. Security is tighter, guest lists vetted with almost paranoid thoroughness. Every gathering serves a purpose, strengthening an alliance, discussing a deal, reaffirming loyalty. There is little room for the curious or the casual. At home in Malabo, the public appearances remain strategic. He still cuts ribbons, delivers speeches, and attends state events. But these are woven into a narrative of steady, responsible leadership. The charity work continues, often highlighted in local media. He positions himself not as the reckless prince of the old headlines, but as the reliable face of continuity. What disappears during these years is the unpredictability. Every move is calculated, every appearance vetted for how it will read not tomorrow, but years from now. It is the behavior of a man who knows that his legacy will be written not just in what he did when the cameras were on, but in what he preserved when they weren't. To outsiders, it may look like the glamour has faded. But to those within his world, the quiet years are when the scaffolding of his future is being built. Piece by piece, alliance by alliance, far from the noise that once defined him. In the end, this is the paradox of Teodoran's quiet years. The less the public sees, the more securely the empire hums beneath the surface. And when the time comes to step back into the spotlight, everything will be exactly where he left it, waiting. The years of discretion eventually give way to a new phase, not one of retreat, but of rebranding. Teodorine begins to appear again on the international circuit, this time with a sharper sense of curation. The parties are not gone, but they are framed differently. The yachts and penthouses remain, yet now they are paired with events that project a certain gravitas. Art openings, cultural forums, investment summits. In Marrakech, he arrives at a luxury hotel where the courtyard glows with lantern light, the air heavy with the scent of jasmine and spice. It is the opening night of an African cultural festival, and he is photographed not with champagne in hand, but beside prominent artists and curators. His tailored suit is still flawless, his watch still rare, but the message is clear. This is about heritage, not hedonism. In Abu Dhabi, he steps onto the stage of an international economic forum, seated in a panel alongside ministers and CEOs. The conversation is about sustainable development in Africa, and his remarks are polished, rehearsed to blend aspiration with authority. Cameras capture him gesturing toward a map, speaking about investment opportunities in sectors beyond oil. Many people still think that these appearances are just a public relations exercise, an attempt to polish the brand without changing the core. But others point out that the audience he's courting now is different, more boardroom than dance floor. So what do you think? Is this reinvention genuine, or just a new layer over the same foundation? The rebranding is subtle but thorough. His social media presence, once a highlight reel of speedboats and designer clothes, shifts to include images of him visiting schools, meeting with entrepreneurs, and standing at the ribbon cutting of infrastructure projects. The captions are measured, the tone less boastful, more statesmanlike. This doesn't mean the old life has vanished. He still summers in the Mediterranean, still attends private concerts where the performer is flown in just for the evening. But now, the photographs from these moments rarely leak. The inner circle has grown even more disciplined, understanding that the new image can only hold if the old one is kept in the shadows. The alliances formed in his quieter years now begin to show their value. Invitations come not just from Fashion Week organizers and art dealers, but from government hosts in Asia and Latin America, from high-profile NGOs seeking to partner on global initiatives. These platforms allow him to position himself as more than the sum of his luxuries. In Paris, he funds a restoration project for a historic building in a neighborhood known for its African diaspora. In Lagos, he underwrites an entrepreneurship program for young creatives. In New York, he attends a closed-door dinner at the United Nations, where the conversation is less about past controversies and more about future opportunities. The shift is not without skepticism. Critics continue to frame him through the lens of his earlier excesses, pointing out that no amount of cultural patronage can erase the questions about where his fortune began. But in the fast-moving world of public image, consistency can soften skepticism over time. The more people see him in settings that suggest stability and purpose, the more those old headlines begin to fade into the background noise. And in this phase, Teodoro demonstrates something that has kept him in play for decades: adaptability. The Playboy prince, the embattled defendant, the quiet operator, all have been chapters in the same story. Now comes the chapter of the cultural and economic figure, one who can walk into a room of investors or ministers and command attention without saying a word about the past. It's not that the old Teodoro is gone. He's simply learned to move him backstage, letting the new version stand in the light. And in the long game of power and perception, that might be the most valuable transformation of all. For all the polish of his rebranded image, there remains a core truth. Teodoro has never been a man who stands still. Even in the most carefully curated moments, there is a quiet restlessness, a sense that every appearance is just one move in a longer strategy. Those close to him say he speaks of the future not in years, but in positions, where he needs to be, what role he must play, whose hand he should be shaking when the time comes. This is when the whispers of succession begin to grow louder. His father's long tenure has created both stability and inevitability. Eventually, there will be a passing of the torch, and the question of who will carry it is no longer hypothetical. In Equatorial Guinea's political landscape, loyalty and proximity are as valuable as policy, and in both, he has a near unassailable position. Publicly, he sidesteps direct discussion of leadership. When asked about politics, his responses are vague, couched in talk of service, of supporting the president, of focusing on development projects. Privately, the conversation is different. Advisors run scenarios, the timing of a transition, the alliances that must be secured, the regions where support needs to be shored up. Many people still think that his bid for succession is a foregone conclusion, that as the president's son, the position is his to inherit. But others see a more complex picture, one where internal rivals, shifting loyalties, and international scrutiny could complicate the path. So what do you think? Is the throne inevitable, or will the game be harder than it looks? In preparation, his presence in domestic politics grows more pronounced. He chairs committees, oversees high-profile infrastructure projects, and appears in photographs alongside foreign dignitaries visiting Malabo. His speeches take on a more national tone, less about his personal contributions and more about our shared vision and the future of the nation. The optics are careful. At military parades, he stands in a position that signals authority without overshadowing his father. At regional summits, he represents the country with a polished mix of diplomacy and showmanship, dressed in suits that whisper wealth without screaming excess. Behind the scenes, he strengthens the internal network that would support a leadership transition. Provincial governors, influential business leaders, and senior military officers are quietly courted. Some are given roles in projects tied to his initiatives, ensuring they have a stake in his rise. Others are brought into his inner social circle, invited to the kinds of dinners and gatherings where alliances are built, not through formal agreements, but through the shared intimacy of a well-poured drink and a conversation away from microphones. Internationally, he tests the waters. Visits to friendly nations are framed as economic or cultural missions, but they also serve to gauge how other leaders would respond to his future role. The responses are cautious, but not dismissive. In some capitals, his name is already spoken as a likely next president. In others, the old controversies still cast a shadow, and yet, he seems to thrive on the uncertainty. The path is not guaranteed, but the challenge seems to sharpen his instincts. He knows that if the moment comes, it will be sudden, and he will have to step into it fully formed, ready not just to hold the office, but to command it. For now, the succession remains an unspoken horizon, visible but undefined. He continues to play the roles required of him, adding layers to the image he has worked so hard to control. Whether he ascends or not, he ensures that when the conversation turns to the future of Equatorial Guinea, his name is never far from the center. The story of Teodoro Nguema Obiang Mange closes not with a grand finale, but with a portrait of contradictions, each thread of his life weaving into a fabric that is at once opulent, controversial, and strangely enduring. By the time the second decade of the 21st century begins to draw to a close, he is no longer just the oil prince in tailored suits, nor merely the subject of courtroom dramas and tabloid spreads. He is a man who has outlasted storms that would have sunk lesser figures, reshaping himself each time the tide turned. In Malibu, the ocean still whispers against the cliffs below his estate. The gold Lamborghini still catches the sunlight when the garage doors roll open. The Paris penthouse, though once raided and stripped of treasures, has been quietly refurnished. Different art on the walls, different bottles in the wine cellar, but the same view of the Eiffel Tower's nightly sparkle. The yacht still traces its summer routes through the Mediterranean, albeit with smaller, more loyal guest lists. In Malabo, the palace gardens remain lush, the air scented with imported jasmine. Official events still see him standing beside his father, the pair framed as the twin pillars of a regime that has defied the volatility of African politics for decades. His speeches speak of continuity, of unity, of national pride. His image in local media is that of a man who straddles two worlds, the cosmopolitan elite abroad and the custodian of his nation's interests at home. Many people still think that his legacy will be defined solely by the excess, the cars, the watches, the yachts. But others argue that his real accomplishment is survival, the ability to remain relevant, powerful, and wealthy, despite years of legal pursuit and political pressure. So what do you think? Will history remember the spectacle or the resilience? The legal cases never entirely disappear, but they fade into the background, replaced by new headlines in a world with a short attention span. Settlements are reached, fines are paid, some assets are surrendered, others reclaimed. The machinery of his wealth continues to operate, adjusted for new realities but never dismantled. What he leaves behind, whether one day as president or simply as the most infamous heir to never take the throne, will depend on which narrative proves stronger. For some, he He will always be the symbol of African oil wealth spent on champagne and supercars. For others, he will be the embodiment of a certain kind of power, adaptable, resilient, and unwilling to yield to the forces that sought to contain him. In private moments, perhaps on the deck of his yacht at dawn, the water stretching calm and endless, he might consider the arc of it all. The boy in Malabo who learned to watch every handshake, the young man in Paris who learned to spend as though the world were watching, the embattled figure in court who refused to bow, the seasoned operator who learned when to be seen and when to disappear. And as the sun edges over the horizon, lighting the sea in gold, it is easy to imagine that for Teodoro, the real prize was never just the wealth or the title. It was the ability to keep moving forward, to remain the author of his own story, even when others tried to write it for him. And now, as the lights dim in our story, the edges soften, the roar of engines fades, the flash of cameras grows faint, and the hum of the city is replaced by the low, steady rhythm of the sea. The yachts are at anchor, their decks quiet under the starlight. In Malibu, the waves brush against the rocks in a gentle, unbroken pattern, like breathing in and out. In Malabo, the palace gardens rest in stillness, the scent of night flowers drifting on a warm breeze. Whatever we think of the man, his excesses, his defiance, his reinventions, there is a kind of stillness in the image of him alone at dawn, watching the horizon change color. Here, the noise of the world cannot reach him. Here, there is no courtroom, no motorcade, no entourage. Only the slow passage of time and the sound of water against the hull. And as the first light spills over the ocean, we too can let the story rest. The details will remain, the gold, the marble, the whispered deals. But for now, we can let them drift away. The night holds us in its calm. The air is cool and steady, and the world outside these words grows softer, quieter, more distant. So take a breath, let your shoulders loosen, and let your eyes grow heavy. The story is complete. The journey is done. And all that's left is the quiet space where thoughts slow down and the mind finds its way toward rest.